A lot of people, like, they get into the year and they say, let's lower the goals. I actually think if you lower the goals, you're less likely to achieve them because you care less about those goals. You're less excited by them. They're less meaningful to you. I'm Michael Mogill, founder and CEO of Crisp, the nation's #1 law firm growth company. I've built my business through practice, not theory. Crisp started with just $500 to my name and has grown to over 8 figures in revenue over the last few years, earning a spot on the Inc. 500 list of the fastest growing private companies in America. Our approach has been to take everything we've learned about generating massive growth within our own organization and help the country's most ambitious and committed law firm owners do the same for theirs. In each episode of this podcast, I sit down with innovative market leaders from the legal industry and beyond to learn from those who thrive in the face of adversity, challenge the status quo, and define what it means to be a true game changer.
This is Jessica, Head of Coaching Strategy at Crisp, and today we're flipping the script for another special edition episode to get Michael's take on why most resolutions fail and how to turn empty promises into real results, how to push through challenges, pivot with confidence, and stay on track, and how to set bold, ambitious targets without setting yourself up for failure.
You can achieve anything that you set out to achieve. It's just, I think that the reason why some things can seem impossible or insurmountable is you're trying to get it done in a year, or you're trying to get it done in a quarter or in a month. And if you gave yourself a longer time scale, things become much more viable.
That's coming up on the Game Changing Attorney podcast. Here we are, Michael. Good to see you for another AMMA.
Yeah, Jessica, good to see you again.
Good to see you. It's been a long time.
I know, back for another AMMA. Thank you guys for joining us. I don't know what we're going to talk about today, but I will say I'm wearing the theme for this year, the Crisp theme shirt.
Yes.
So we had our kind of year kickoff meeting, and at the end of every kickoff meeting, we kind of lay out the theme for the year. We like to do themes, kind of rally the organization, and this year it is. The shirt says, it's like let with a line crossed through it, and it says make it happen, right? It's the difference between letting things happen and making things happen. I talked about this a good bit yesterday, and it really has to do with just this idea that there's a large portion of human beings that let the pieces fall wherever they fall, right? They'll, like, whether it's in business or personal, whichever way the wind blows, just whatever happens. Oh, we didn't quite pull it off. We didn't hit the targets, or I didn't quite, do the thing I said I was going to do, but I tried my best. These are like the most dangerous words ever said by a human being because they're nonsense, right? Because they're saying, I tried my best. The problem with this is the fact that this is subjective. When someone says they tried their best, do you really know that it was their best? Do they even know that it was their best? If their, entire livelihood was on the line, would that be the same amount of effort, let's say, that they would put towards something versus the effort that they put in when they said that they tried their best? Who knows? Did they even know what their best is? The challenge with this is that, if you allow things to just happen, right? And if something just, again, we see this a lot in professional sports, you see this in business, when a goal is not hit, a target isn't met, and then you have like a head coach who, usually the ones that aren't so great, that don't take a whole lot of accountability, they'll say, we tried our best. And it's like, well, did you try your best? And was that acceptable? And then there is the other, the uncommon individuals and the uncommon organizations that just found a way to make things happen, found a way to get things done, no matter the adversity they were under, no matter the challenges that they went through, no matter just anything that they had to overcome. Sometimes your best isn't good enough. Sometimes you need to do better. Sometimes you need to gain new skills. You need to gain new capabilities to be able to achieve a certain outcome or output that you haven't achieved before. So letting things happen is just allowing the results to be the results, and making things happen is exercising free will. It's the difference between a should and a must. And when something must happen, the amount of energy, creativity, resourcefulness, just someone being strategic, that changes. And when I look back over the years at Crisp, some of the most difficult things that we've had to overcome, it forced us to grow and it forced us to evolve, and we had to make things happen. And then when you look back and you say, okay, there was these pivotal moments where we could look at it and say, look, this is the direction we're heading, and perhaps it doesn't align with where we're trying to go. You could say that you're on the way to failure to some extent, and you change something. You change some of the action steps, you change certain habits, you gain new skills, you try a different approach, something, and you find a way to make it happen no matter, whatever deficit that you're under. So I think back to, and this is kind of a sore spot for a lot of us in Atlanta, to the Falcons and Patriots Super Bowl. And when the Patriots were down 28-3, at the half, coming in, to the second half, they could say, you know what, we tried our best. We had a great season, and we all worked very hard, but we're down by a seemingly insurmountable deficit, and that's just the way it's going to go, right? Like their odds or their probability of turning around that game were extremely low, and yet they found a way to get it done, and they found a way to win, and they found a way to make it happen. So this is a focus on just people being, drivers, people being, pushed in many ways to, it's like a call to greatness in some respects, but it's also a standard within the organization that we don't let things happen, we make things happen. So that's why we got the shirts. Every year we got the Mighty Ducks, jerseys and the shirts. So rallied around that, and that's our theme for this year. But I'm excited for the questions that we have today. So for those of you tuning in, this is the AMMA, where you guys submit your questions, and then we answer them here on the podcast. And you can submit your questions by texting us at 404-531-7691, and we might just answer your question here on the podcast. And if you're tuning in for the first time, there's this AMMA, but we also do other types of episodes where we interview guests, and then also encore editions, we bring back some of our most popular episodes. But like I said, this is the AMMA. Jessica, what do we got this week? Let's see if we can shake the rust off in the new year.
Yeah. So perfect for the new year is really thinking about goals. So question number 1, Michael, I always start the year motivated, but I never seem to stick with the plan. How do you structure your commitments so they don't fall apart a few months in?
Well, it starts off by not relying on motivation.
Right.
Because motivation is, it's like a roller coaster. It's like, it's up and down. Some days you're motivated, some days you're not. Some days you feel like it, some days you don't. And if you rely on motivation, this is going to be fleeting. So if you come in all excited, you're not alone. I mean, so do most people. They come in, they say, new year, new me. And then what? Something happens where you hit the first obstacle and then motivation starts to subside a little bit. And then before you know it, you've kind of given up on what you said you wanted to do. So I look at it from the standpoint of, how do you make success inevitable? It starts by having a clear commitment to what it is you're trying to do. So if you have some sort of habit that you want to put in place, if it's like a personal goal, like a fitness goal, or whether you want to spend more time with your kids, or whether you want to go, spend more time with your spouse, or whether it's a business goal, some sort of like business targets in terms of either the growth of the business, revenue, profitability, or how you spend your time within the business, being freed up to focus on certain things. Whatever that is, it's ensuring it's something that you are sold yourself on, so that you are excited about it and it's worthwhile to you, and that it's meaningful enough to you that you're actually going to, be willing to do the action steps necessary to do it. Then step 2 is, in terms of making it inevitable, is looking at what are all the barriers that stand in the way of this actually getting done? Like, what are all the problems? What are all the obstacles that could, let's say, and we mentioned this a few times on the podcast, if you have a health goal or something like that, you want to eat healthy, how are you controlling your environment? How are you putting yourself in a position to be successful? Because you don't want to be, utilizing willpower. And if you're in an environment where you've got cookies and cupcakes and, all sorts of unhealthy foods, it's going to be much more difficult for you to stay, on track with your diet. At the same time, a lot of it also comes down to the people you surround yourself with. If you are committed to, let's say, doing things within the business and you want to grow and succeed, if you can be around people that are a positive influence for you and root for you versus those that are detractors and critics, so it's finding the right community of people that are advocates for you. And then the final thing I'd say is just when you make it inevitable, you can shift from a to-do list to a calendar. Really put it on the calendar. Whatever it is that you're setting out to do, whether it's health and fitness, whether it's date nights, whether it's anything in the business in terms of like quarterly planning meetings, and block those out up front, right? If you say, hey, I want to really take 3 vacations with my family this year, well, then block out the vacations in advance instead of getting into the middle of the year and saying, well, I got to find time to take a vacation. And then you can fill in, it's kind of like the pebbles and the rocks and the sand analogy. And you want to start with the big rocks, and then you put in the pebbles, and then you fill in the sand. And that's the way to do it, as opposed to trying to fill in these things as you're in the middle of life, in the middle of your day to day. So it's just looking at it, how do you make it inevitable? James Clear tends to make a lot of money around this time because he released the book Atomic Habits.
Yes.
And, it becomes one of the Amazon bestsellers of how to put great habits in place. But it is a great book if you haven't read it. If you have, it could be a great refresher. But it really just comes down to establishing, just those habits. And a lot of times it's not like adding things. Sometimes it's really taking things away. Another great book and another great podcast that we've done is with Jay Papasan, who wrote The One Thing. So that's a great book and a great podcast to listen to, especially at the start of the year. And so I would look at it more so from the standpoint of, instead of rather like what is going to be necessary for me to achieve this goal, it's what can stand in the way of me achieving this goal. And if you can solve for all the barriers, you're going to make success and inevitability. So sometimes you have to gain skills, and sometimes you have to gain capabilities. Sometimes it's a function of controlling your environment. That's another book that's called Willpower Doesn't Work. And it's all about controlling your environment and setting up your environment for success. So those are the quick items. But I would say having some degree of accountability, whether it's something you make public, whether you have an accountability buddy or partner, having clear metrics around what you're trying to do. So quantifying it instead of saying, hey, I want the business to grow. You say, okay, grow by how much, exactly, by when. People talk about the SMART goals, right?
Right.
But just being, making it quantifiable so you can know exactly, okay, have we achieved what we've set out to achieve? And then working backwards from that, right? It's no different than if you want to run an Ironman or a marathon or whatever it is you want to achieve. Again, like putting numbers and data behind it, quantifying this. And a lot of what I'm talking about is just taking this seriously and being a professional. I mean, I think there's even like the likelihood of you achieving your goals, I think is sometimes like 3 times higher if you just simply write your goals down. I don't know if that's true.
I don't know either.
But I've read that.
All the stats,
What is it, like 60% of statistics are made up?
Yeah.
Something like that. But it really just comes down to having the right intent and then designing an environment for you to be successful. And if you can do that, you're going to be much more likely to succeed than if you just say, here's what I'm setting out to do, and you don't have a track record of actually achieving things. Funny, I was having a conversation with someone today, and we were talking about New Year's resolutions, which I think New Year's resolutions are for children. If you're an adult and you are serious about something that you want to do, then as soon as you set your mind to it, it should be done.
Yeah.
Done. Okay? In my mind, if I'm going to commit to something, it might as well be done, right? Because you write the check, you dedicate the time on your calendar, you put the habits in place, you make sure any sort of barriers that stand in the way of it, you address them right up front, and then you actually go out and achieve what you have to achieve, which can take months, years, depending on what it is that you're setting out to do. But you take this seriously. Anything else is kind of, you're dipping your toe in the water and you're saying, here's what I'm going to do this year. And if that's all you did, just said something, then is that really enough when you look at somebody else who's actually breaking this goal down into certain metrics and designing their environment to ensure that they're able to be successful and eliminating barriers that stand in the way, and then they have accountability in place, and they've made some sort of like financial commitment as well. So sometimes it's like if you don't pay attention sort of thing. So you're much more likely to stick with some sort of, like, let's say, personal training if you hire an expensive personal trainer versus if you have like a $10 a month gym membership. And it's just because you're going to be more vested in it, quite literally. Okay? So someone could say, well, I don't want to spend that amount of money because I could get a gym membership for, much cheaper, $10 a month. You say, okay, great. It's not the gym membership that you're paying for your commitment to it is what it is that you're setting out to do. I can go on and on about this topic, but you got to be a professional. And if you're truly serious about it, you're going to actually get, your intent is going to be designing your environment to succeed.
And you got to make it public. I will keep on that as well in terms of accountability. Like even you mentioned our team meeting, our team sets out goals at the beginning of the year as well, whether it's personal, professional, and our head of people actually collects those if the people, the team wants that. But she checks in with them every quarter and says, what's happening? Where are you at? Like, you asked me to hold you accountable, so I am doing that. And so you gotta make it public.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, question number 2. Michael, sometimes life throws unexpected challenges my way, and I start to question whether I should stick to my original goals or adjust them. How do you know when it's time to pivot versus staying the course?
It's tough to not have full context in this question because sometimes it's a function of, let's say, in the business, you experience a degree of adversity, someone you hired didn't work out, and you were counting on them to make a certain impact in the business. Now you've got to find somebody new and go out there and hire them, train them, onboard them, etc., right? Get them ready. That could set you back a bit. So sometimes it's a function of just not adjusting the goals, or the targets rather, but the action steps themselves. So like what you're setting out to do doesn't change. It's like how you get there might. So you may have to pivot in that respect. However, let's say in a scenario where, like, let's say you want to grow your business by 20% this year, but then a close family member gets sick. And it's a question of, do I spend the time with them or do I focus more so on the business? And that's tough, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I say it depends because, it's, okay, if there's a way you could do both, great. And Bill Perkins talked about this as well as a regret minimization framework. So it's like if you were to, look back across your life, what would you regret? Would you regret not spending time with that family member when they're sick? And perhaps that should be prioritized over the growth of the business. Maybe, growing your business by 20% is, in in a year isn't going to be as meaningful as spending time with, a sick family member. So that's why I say it really just depends. And sometimes it's a pivot in the business, like where outside of anything like personal health related and anything personal, outside of that, it's really just a matter of adjusting the action steps. It's like, okay, we're not changing the goal, because I know a lot of people, like, they get into the year and they say, let's lower the goals. I actually think if you lower the goals, you're less likely to achieve them, because you care less about those goals. You're less excited by them. They're less meaningful to you. So now you're just lowering the hoop, saying this is what we can do this year, right? Rather than saying, okay, well, I like to change the question and instead say, what would it take, right? So less about can we do it, but what would it take to do it? And then you can determine if the juice is worth the squeeze, and then how you're going to approach it. So that we do this also with our team members and with the leadership team. When we set out to do something, it's not can we do it, it's what would it take to do it. And then we look at that and say, well, if we have to prioritize this and then deprioritize something else, is that trade-off worthwhile? And does that make sense in terms of the vision that we have for the organization? So that's the way I'd look at it. But it really comes down to like regret minimization. I would just be careful here with it, depending on, again, it's tough without knowing the full context. Like I really wish, I wish you guys would submit questions with a little bit more context sometimes, because then I could better answer it and make sure that this person actually gets the answer that they're looking for. Again, it really just breaks down to, when you look back across your life, what are you going to regret more? But sometimes it really is, you're going to regret not solving these challenges in your business, because, 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now, you're going to be solving the same things, and you're going to be stuck, and you're going to wish that you could spend your time differently, and you're going to wish you had a little bit more financial freedom, and you're going to wish you could do more things. But maybe the trade-offs you were making then was, I want to go spend time with my buddies. I want to chill, right? I talked about this yesterday too. I was like, these people that just chill.
It's not in your vocabulary.
Yeah. I would never want to be described as a chill guy, right?
Don't worry,
that would
that's
hurt
at the
my
very
feelings.
bottom of the list.
Imagine on the tombstone, they say, Michael Mogill, chill guy. I'm like, where did I go wrong? Again, some people say, well, who am I to judge, right? Maybe that's what they enjoy, and maybe that's what's important to them. Maybe. Or maybe they're avoiding the difficult things that could actually lead them to grow and improve, and they're just seeking comfort instead. Chilling is comfort. Solving difficult problems and making a meaningful impact, that's hard to do. But I'll tell you, sometimes, it's, the goal for me has always been, and what I've realized is that, like, succeeding is more fun than fun is fun. So that may not apply to somebody listening, but going through something difficult, having to overcome it, having to learn new skills, new capabilities, having to solve difficult problems, having to figure it out. And it's difficult when you're going through it. It's very painful. But then when you get through it and you look back and you say, wow, I've really grown as a result. And if you look back across your life, it's like, would you be the person that you are today had you not gone through those periods of adversity? So that's what I look at. If the question is, do you pivot? For most business things, I'd say that, don't adjust the goals, just adjust the action steps. So like how you're going to get there, that might have to change from the initial plan. But then if it's anything personal related, it just really comes down to, are you going to regret not having done something or spent some time with someone? So it just depends. There's nuance.
Yes. All right. To round us out today with question number 3, I want to set big goals for myself, but sometimes I worry I'm aiming too high and setting myself up for failure. How do you balance ambition with setting realistic targets you can actually achieve?
So here's the best part. You can achieve anything that you set out to achieve. It's just, I think that the reason why some things can seem impossible or insurmountable is you're trying to get it done in a year, or you're trying to get it done in a quarter or in a month. And if you gave yourself a longer time scale, things become much more viable. So for example, if you said, whatever this big ambition that you have, what if you gave yourself 10 years to do it? Okay, now it seems much more doable. Let's say you're a law firm owner, your practice is at 3 to 5 million or something, you want to get to 20 million, right? If you say, hey, we're going to get to 20 million this year, and you've never done that before, and you're at 3 to 5 million, that's probably going to be unlikely, okay? Because there's a lot of things in the organization that have to change, and even you could generate the business.
Yeah.
What you would have to do from a, operational standpoint, infrastructure, people, human capital, like just all of that, it just takes time. But if you gave yourself 3 years or 5 years to do it, then you'd say, okay, that's absolutely doable. You can still have the same goal. It just have to change the time scale. And I'm a big fan of like 10-year thinking. So you can think on a long enough time scale to where you could really just do whatever it is that you want. So instead of limiting yourself to what can I do this year, and then once you set this 10-year goal, you can break that down and say, okay, here's what we're going to do in the first 5 years, and then the first 3, and then the first year, and then the first quarter, and you know what I mean? You should start to really break it down. But that's, to me, it's always been incredibly empowering, because that lets you decide to do whatever you want whatever you want and whatever is exciting to you, you can do it. You can absolutely do it. I'm not going to play in the NBA, right? But as far as anything in the business, I mean, yeah, you can absolutely achieve it. Just give yourself a long enough time scale to do it, to where you don't feel like you have to achieve it today, because usually things take longer than you think. But oftentimes we underestimate what we can achieve in the long term. We probably overestimate what we can achieve in the short term.
Yeah.
So to me, it really comes down to the time scale. And if there's something you really want, just give yourself enough time to do it. And this isn't like procrastination or going slow or anything like that, because, sometimes, like even this year at our all hands meeting, we shared a target, and originally it was going to be 5 years. And I said, I want to get it done in 3.
Yeah.
Okay. But I didn't say I want to get it done this year. I didn't say I want to get it done in 3 months, right? We can still move at a fast pace, but we're thinking 3 years.
Yeah.
As opposed to 5 years. And I used to think just in terms of like even like weeks.
Yeah.
Just think like week to week, month to month, and quarter to quarter. That's fine, right? But really, I think you're sometimes doing yourself a disservice, because if you think on a long enough time scale, now the decisions you make, you're thinking for the long term. So a decision you make today, you look at it and say, is this going to make sense 3 years from now or 5 years from now? As opposed to making short-term decisions that are only going to make sense today, but are going to be something you have to make a different decision on. Like you have to redo it, or you're going to have to fix or improve, right? So it's like you're moving into a new, like, let's say, technology platform. And you're saying, this is great for us today, but is it going to be what makes sense for us 2 years from now? And if it doesn't make sense 2 years from now, we're going to make that shift. Then why don't we just start in the one that's going to make sense 2 years from now?
Exactly.
But you're not going to have that, that type of thinking if you're not thinking on a long enough time scale. So I'm a big fan. I can always tell somebody's going to be successful when they're making decisions that are like 5 years out or 10 years out, because they can exude a level of like patience in the long term, but also a degree of urgency in the short term, where they want to move quickly. They want to make decisions. They want to move fast, but at the same time, they have, a big vision that doesn't have to be achieved today, right? Well, it's like Rome wasn't built in a day sort of thing.
Yeah.
So.
All right. That rounds us out today. Thank you.
Great. My pleasure.
You've been listening to the Game Changing Attorney podcast with Michael Mogill. If you found this episode valuable, here are 3 free ways that we can help you grow your law firm. Number 1, download the first chapter of Michael's book absolutely free at gamechangingattorney.com. Number 2, you can shoot Michael a text at 404-531-7691 and ask him any question you'd like. You might just hear the answer on the next episode. And finally, number 3, if you can leave this podcast a 5-star review, it will help us gain access to more influential thought leaders and bring their lessons learned here to you. For more information on this episode, see the show notes in your podcast app or visit legalpodcast.com.